I'm James. I'm 72 years old, and I need to tell you something I've carried for 8 years now. Something that sits in my chest like a stone every single morning when I wake up alone. You need to hear this. Not because I want your pity, but because what I'm about to share might stop you from making the quietest mistake a person can make. The one that doesn't scream, it just settles. My wife Emily and I were married for 43 years. 43 years of shared coffee cups, shared holidays, shared silence. And for most of that time, I believed we had what people call a successful marriage. We paid the mortgage, we raised our son, we never went to bed angry, well, not visibly angry anyway. We were polite, respectful, two ships passing in the same harbor every night, docking side by side, but never really tying our ropes together. Emily died 8 years ago, heart failure. 1 minute she was humming in the kitchen while making tea, the next, well, the doctors called it sudden. I called it a verdict. Because in those last few breaths, her hand found mine, and she whispered something I've replayed in my head 10,000 times since. We forgot to look up. I didn't understand it then. I thought she meant literally, like she'd been staring at the floor too long. But no, she meant we'd forgotten to look up from our routines, from our separate newspapers at breakfast, from our separate worries, from the quiet assumption that love was a foundation you built once and then just lived on top of forever. Let me tell you what that looked like in practice. Every Sunday morning for 20 years, Emily would make pancakes. Not just any pancakes. She'd fold blueberries into the batter, draw silly faces with the syrup for our son when he was small. And every Sunday, without fail, I'd sit at the table with the sports section open, nodding when she spoke, grunting when the coffee was ready. I was there, physically, but I was reading box scores while she was building rituals. I was calculating next quarter's earnings while she was measuring love in tablespoons of butter. She tried to pull me back, not with demands, never with demands. She'd say things like, "Remember when we used to read to each other before bed?" Or, "What if we started that garden you always talked about?" And I'd say, "Maybe next spring," or, "I'm just so tired tonight, Em." And she'd smile that thin smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes anymore, and say, "Of course, another time." But here's what I didn't realize. Every another time was a brick in a wall between us. Not a dramatic wall, not one built with shouting or slamming doors. A wall made of missed sunrises, of conversations I cut short because I had emails to answer. I thought I was being practical, responsible. I thought providing stability was the same as providing presence. It wasn't. One evening, this was maybe 5 years before she died, I came home late from work, again. She was sitting on the porch swing, watching fireflies blink in the yard. I sat beside her, loosened my tie, and started talking about a case I'd won that day. She didn't respond, just kept watching the fireflies. After a minute, I stopped talking. And then she said, so softly I almost missed it, "They only light up for a few seconds, you know, and then they go dark again. You have to really watch to see the pattern." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing, I went inside to check messages, and that moment is what haunts me most. Not the big fights we never had, not the affairs we never committed, but that quiet surrender on a porch swing while fireflies performed their tiny miracles right in front of us, and I chose my inbox over her wonder. After she died, I found a shoebox in the back of her closet. Inside were letters. Not love letters from our youth, though there were some of those too. These were different. They were letters she'd written to me over the years, but never sent. Dozens of them. Dated not with years or months. She avoided dates, I noticed that, but with seasons. The Tuesday after the first snow. The Sunday the magnolias bloomed. The night the power went out and we lit candles. I read them all in one sitting, and with each page I met a woman I'd slept beside for decades, but never truly knew. She wrote about watching me sleep and wondering what I dreamed about. She wrote about the way I hummed when I thought no one was listening. She wrote about feeling like a guest in her own home, polite, welcome, but never quite seen. One letter said, "Today he asked me how my day was, and for a second, just a second, I thought he really wanted to know. But his eyes were already on his phone before I finished the first sentence. I told him it was fine, because what else is there to say?" I sat there on the floor of that closet, surrounded by decades of her silent longing, and I broke. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way our marriage had ended. You see, I'd confused absence with peace. I thought no conflict meant everything was okay. But absence isn't peace, it's vacancy. And vacancy invites loneliness to move in and unpack its bags. Emily didn't leave me, she just receded. I think about our son sometimes, Daniel, how he learned from me that love is something you do. Pay bills, show up to graduations, fix the leaky faucet, but not something you feel out loud, not something you nurture daily like a plant. I taught him to be responsible. I failed to teach him to be present. And now I wonder if he's making the same quiet mistakes in his own marriage, thinking that reliability is the same as intimacy. There was this one afternoon, maybe 3 years before she died. We were cleaning out the garage, and we found this old birdhouse I'd started building when Daniel was little. Never finished it, just left it on a shelf with the paint half dried. Emily picked it up, ran her thumb over the rough wood and said, "You know, the wrens tried to nest in it anyway, made a little mess of twigs inside." And she smiled, not a sad smile, but a real one, like she was remembering something tender. And I said, "God, I actually said this." I said, "We should throw that thing out. It's useless." She didn't argue, just placed it back on the shelf, exactly where she'd found it. But something in her posture changed, like a door closing softly. And I stood there, holding a bag of trash, completely unaware that I'd just thrown away a moment. Not the birdhouse, the moment. The chance to say, "Tell me about those wrens." The chance to sit with her on the garage steps and watch the real birds flying overhead. The chance to be curious about her world instead of efficient in mine. That's the thing about indifference. It doesn't feel like a choice in the moment. It feels like practicality, like tiredness, like we'll get to it later. But later is a myth we tell ourselves to avoid the discomfort of now. And now is all we ever have. After the funeral, people kept saying, "She was so lucky to have you all those years." And I'd nod, because what else do you do? But inside I was screaming, no, I was the lucky one, and I wasted it. I wasn't a bad husband. That's the tragedy. I was a fine husband, and fine is the enemy of love. Fine is what you settle for when you stop believing magic is possible. Fine is the wallpaper you put up over cracks you're too tired to repair. And after a while, you stop seeing the cracks altogether. You just see the pattern on the wallpaper and call it home. Emily deserved more than fine. She deserved wonder. She deserved to be looked at like she was still a surprise after 40 years. She deserved someone who put down the newspaper on Sunday mornings and watched her pour the batter. Not because it was his duty, but because he was still captivated by the way her wrist moved when she stirred. I think about that porch swing sometimes, the fireflies, how I could have just stayed, how I could have said, "Tell me about their pattern," how one sentence, just one, might have changed the trajectory of an entire evening, of an entire year, of the last years we had. But I didn't. And here's my question for you. Really sit with this. When did you last choose wonder over efficiency with the person you love? When did you last put your phone down, not because they asked you to, but because their face was more interesting than any screen? When did you last ask a question you didn't already think you knew the answer to? Because love isn't about knowing everything about someone. It's about staying curious. It's about believing there are still undiscovered countries inside the person sleeping beside you. And it dies not when you stop loving them, but when you stop looking for them. I keep one of Emily's unsent letters on my nightstand now, the last one she wrote. It says, "Today the sun hit the kitchen table just right, and for a minute it looked like honey. I wished you were there to see it with me. Not just in the room, but really there. But I didn't call you. I just watched the light move across the wood until it was gone. And then I made tea." I read that every morning, not to punish myself, though it hurts, but to remember, love is made of light on tables, of fireflies in jars, of blueberries folded gently into batter, of hands reaching in the dark. And if you're not paying attention, if you're too busy being responsible, being practical, being fine, the light moves on. The fireflies go dark. The moment passes. And one day you're standing in an empty kitchen, remembering honey-colored sun, and the person who wanted to share it with you is gone. Don't wait for a deathbed to get honest. Don't wait for a shoebox of unsent letters to realize you've been living with a stranger. Look up tonight. Put your phone in another room. Ask a real question. Listen like your life depends on it, because in a way, it does. The quality of your life depends on the quality of your attention. Emily was right. We forgot to look up. Don't make our mistake. Your person is still here, still breathing, still hoping you'll see them. Not the role they play in your life, but them, the messy, complicated, beautiful human who chose you. See them while you still can. because 8 years later, I'd give anything, to sit on that porch swing one more time, to watch fireflies with her, to say, "Tell me their pattern," and really mean it. The fireflies are still out there, blinking, waiting, but the person who wanted to watch them with you might not be. Look up before the light moves on. This channel is for folks like me, sharing hard-earned wisdom and memories. If this resonated, subscribe and tap the bell for more. And if it moved you, even a little, drop a comment and hit like.